If a house makes you feel uncomfortable as soon as you enter, don't think too much and leave immediately. Your sixth sense is powerful and won't give a false alarm for no reason. Today's story takes place in a small town in Pennsylvania, USA, called Athens. A person named Mike went there for a business trip and discovered that the house he was staying in had experienced paranormal activities. Curious, Mike checked online and found out that the house had been the scene of a gruesome murder. A couple had killed each other with a knife for unknown reasons, and both died in the house. It's important to note that this story is based on a true event, and you can still find news articles about it online. The crime scene was described as extremely bloody, with the woman's body mutilated and blood all over the floor. I advise you not to search for these details online to avoid disturbing dreams at night. What's even more chilling is that Mike noticed that the furniture in the house seemed unchanged. The bed he slept in appeared to be the same as in the news photos, with only the sheets replaced. The rest of the furniture matched exactly. Let's go back to 2012 to understand the context. After graduating from college, Mike started working in Pennsylvania. In June, he went to Athens with his company's boss for business purposes. The company had a manager named Bob who often had to stay there. To save costs, the company arranged a 2-bedroom apartment for him. Since Mike's visit was also short-term, they decided to save money and stay together in the apartment. The address was easy to find, and upon entering the apartment, Mike immediately detected a strange smell, like something moldy mixed with a hint of stench. Surprisingly, the boss didn't seem to notice or react to it. The smell made Mike feel nauseous, and he had to open the windows for some fresh air. Objectively, the apartment was quite nice. On the left-hand side after entering, there was a kitchen and a large balcony, while on the right-hand side was the living room. Across from the living room was a corridor, with bedrooms on both sides at the end of the corridor. The furniture was complete, and the decor looked relatively new, about 5 or 6 years old at most. However, despite the decent condition of the apartment, Mike couldn't shake off the uncomfortable feeling that lingered throughout the house. It was an unexplainable sensation. The most unsettling thing for Mike in the entire apartment was a Buddha figurine placed on the TV cabinet in the living room. It resembled the Leshan giant Buddha, probably a souvenir bought by the landlord during a trip. The reason it stood out for Mike was that the Buddha's eyes were crooked and looked out of sync, even a bit eerie. Mike and his co-workers finished their work the next day and returned to Pennsylvania. However, a week later, Mike had to go back to Athens for another business trip, this time for a longer period. Coincidentally, the apartment he had previously stayed in was now occupied by another co-worker named John. The company offered to book a hotel for Mike and reimburse the expenses, but he thought the sofa in the apartment would suffice, and he could collect some hotel receipts to claim reimbursement, which would mean extra income for him. To ensure the sofa would be comfortable, Mike even brought a portable folding mattress with him. However, one day, when both Bob and John were out for business elsewhere in Athens and not expected to return that night, they gave Mike the key and suggested he sleep in one of the bedrooms. A proper bed would obviously be more comfortable than the sofa or the portable mattress, and Mike was quite pleased with the idea. However, when he returned to the apartment in the afternoon, he found that the door was stuck and couldn't be opened. It felt like there was someone pressing against it from the inside. Confused by this, Mike tried to call Bob and John to get in touch with the landlord, but they were too busy to answer. He then tried to ask the neighbor upstairs, whose apartment was arranged in a 2-story manner, with 2 households on the upper floor and none on the lower floor. The neighbor, a lady, seemed unwelcoming. Mike introduced himself as a tenant downstairs and inquired about the landlord's contact information. The lady responded with a strange expression, saying she didn't know the landlord's contact and then prepared to close the door. Mike quickly stopped her and asked if she knew where the landlord lived. The lady's reply was even more bewildering. She casually said, "The landlord is in another world," and then she closed the door. Later, John returned the call, but he also didn't have the landlord's contact number. The company had arranged the rental, but nobody remembered who was in charge of it. Left with no other options, Mike decided to search for a locksmith and quickly found one through a small advertisement. The locksmith arrived promptly, and to Mike's surprise, the door opened smoothly. There was no sign of it being stuck or difficult to open. Mike had felt that something was off about the apartment, and with the strange smell he had encountered earlier, he couldn't help but ask the locksmith if he knew what had happened in this place. The locksmith hesitated for a moment, but eventually replied while accepting the offered cigarette, "Well, it would be better for you not to know. Otherwise, you might not be able to stay there anymore." After saying that, the locksmith packed up his tools and left, as if wanting to get away from the place quickly. As the locksmith departed, Mike felt a strong urge to follow him, but after some consideration, he remembered that he had stayed in the apartment before without any issues. Bob and John had also been staying there for a while, so he decided to mark it off as his imagination. However, he continued to be haunted by the incident. After finishing work by 8 p.m. that night, he couldn't resist the temptation and turned on his computer to search online. When he came across the news photos and videos, Mike felt chills all over his body. The furniture in the apartment was exactly the same as in the crime scene, and it seemed that nothing had been changed after the incident. They had simply cleaned it up a bit and rented it out. The thought of sleeping on a bed that was directly involved in such a gruesome event terrified him. Paralyzed with fear, he found himself unable to move from the sofa where he was sitting. He desperately scanned the room and turned on the TV, raising the volume to the maximum, trying to muster up some courage. When there was no one in the apartment, the TV proved to be quite useful. Whether it was the news or a TV show, the presence of voices provided a sense of safety. Feeling disturbed, Mike reached out to a friend who studied religion and shared the entire ordeal. The friend suggested that if he was feeling scared, he could try playing some religious music or reciting prayers. After the conversation, the friend even sent him some audio files. Mike wasted no time and played the files, smoking a cigarette while he listened to the prayers. He debated whether to sleep with the lights on or turn them off and rest for a while. Suddenly, he heard strange noises coming from the bedroom as if someone was breathing heavily. His instinct told him it might be his imagination, but he couldn't help but lower the volume on the TV and music to listen more closely. The heavy breathing sounds seemed to be coming from David's room. When Mike turned off the TV, the sound became even more prominent, almost urging him to find a way to escape. After a while, the kitchen door started shaking violently. In spite of feeling numb, Mike's body regained strength, and he sprang up from the sofa, grabbed his belongings, and bolted toward the door. However, just as he was about to touch the doorknob, the sounds from the kitchen turned shrill and piercing, causing him to almost pass out. He managed to escape and ran out of the apartment. Mike wasn't even sure if the door was open or closed, All he knew was that he had to get away. It wasn't until he reached the main gate of the complex that he finally felt alive again, without daring to look back. The next day, Mike met with his colleagues, Bob and John, and recounted the supernatural experience from the previous night. He expected them to mock him, but to his surprise, they were equally terrified. Bob revealed that the TV in the apartment was actually broken and had never been used. In fact, it was eventually unplugged. The room they had rented belonged to a relative of the couple, and the locals in the area knew the truth. That's why nobody wanted to rent that place, except for outsiders who were unaware of the haunting history. They mustered the courage to pack their belongings during the day and moved away from that foreboding place. After that incident, Mike's health greatly suffered. He experienced months of mental and physical exhaustion before slowly recovering. He never set foot in Athens again.